Welcome to the fate of the Clovis Concord. We're a of friends who have all kind of worked in and out of the cannabis industry and have decided to start playing Dungeons and Dragons together. We're doing a little bit of a recap here for our first three episodes, which we were not recording at the time. So here we are. The year is 835 post-divergence, named for when the sundering occurred and the gods left this realm. It's just after midnight on the 6th day of the month of Undalar, with 20 days until the midpoint of the year. We are in a land far to the north of Wildmount, a massive, frozen, broken continent in the eastern part of Exandria. A continent broken apart by the calamity, the war of the gods and their creations when cities fell from the sky. A continent that no longer remembers the golden age of Arcanum which had risen those great cities from the earth. Nearly 1,000 years since this event, now a continent with three competing powers, two in open war and one caught in the middle. Our story begins with a halfling and a dragonborn riding in a carriage bound for Palebank Village. As they head up the icy road, they look out the window and they can see two moons in the sky. Walking up the icy path in the dark is an elf with dark hair, her pale skin reflecting in the moonlight, braving the cold weather like she was born to it. And as they pass, the dragonborn stops the wagon and offers the elf a ride the rest of the way into town. The carriage pulls into the streets of a small fishing village, letting out the travelers from Uthadern. They enter into a tavern, exhausted from the road, and as they enter, the room is clear due to the very late hour, with the exception of an innkeeper and a very large, sad-looking, travel-weary turtle. Across the room, they also see what looks to be a human sailor with a long beard and hair, his eyes not visible under his three-cornered hat pulled low. The halfling rogue, shrouded and cloaked, he enters the tavern first, quickly moving up to the bar and up the stairs after getting a room for the night. Nyx, elf, enters the tavern next and is warmly greeted by Arl, the dwarven innkeeper of the Jolly Dwarf. And after a quick glance to the corner, she notices the strange turtle-like creature, recognizing it as something from the tropics and a little bit out of place in this icy environment. She walks up to the bar and orders a drink for herself, as well as a second one for her companion who stopped the carriage for her, the Dragonborn. Procuring a room and a drink, she walks across the room to find a table for herself. Orion, the turtle, a being from the Basalt Isle, a world far away to the tropical menagerie coast, notices the bartender chatting with the Dragonborn. A Dragonborn monk named Sikax, wearing a military badge, and he approaches him to make conversation. In a surprising turn of events, though, the Dragonborn angrily gets in Orion's face, asking heatedly about the latter's military service after the turtle does mention serving himself. The pirate-looking fellow in the corner, he kind of hops in here and tries to stand between them, his hand on his sword hilt, ready to intervene if needs be. And the pirate, also after hearing Orion had recently lost a friend, mentions that he did as well. A lot of the travelers to this town have come together for a funeral of a dwarven explorer named Ergon Wenth. The two, Orion and Lara, the pirate, form a little bit of a bond, knowing that Ergon was a good judge of character. And the elf, overhearing this, raises her hand to her mouth with a gasp as she realizes that the sick friend that she had been journeying night and day to try and come help had passed away. They all introduce themselves and, kind of give each other their backstories, and they invite the angry Dragonborn Sikax over to join them, sharing drinks with new friends of memories of a lost friend. The weariness of the day caught up with them as they called it a night and went up to their rooms for the evening. While the group slept, though, the halfling went out into the night on a mission from the Mardoon family back in his home of Shady Creek Run to see where any magical artifacts that might have recently been sold to them were coming from and if there were any more. He put on his dark cloak with a mind for nefarious activity, and then the drunken halfling took a big swig from his rum and walked into the darkness looking for something good. While exploring the settlement, he came to find out that there was not much to rob, but he was able to break into the village leader's home and steal 100 gold pieces. While sneaking out, he did paint a mustache on the leader, Elro, before heading back to his room for the evening. As Milo fell asleep, being entered into his dreams. A smoky, obscured, giant snake-like creature. And knowing Milo's goal of being the best assassin in the world, he offered him a deal here in exchange for his souls and eventual freedom for this monster. He would grant Milo powers to set him on his path for being the best assassin. Following morning, after procuring some cold gear, the went out to face the brisk day and the funeral of a friend. Snow gently fell from the sky, and wind bit at their cheeks as they stood in the graveyard of Palebank Village. The sun was low in the sky, rising behind the fresh grave of Ergon Winth, an old dwarf who caught a curse or some sort of disease that ended up turning him into some sort of ice statue. And they are ultimately recruited by the village leader, Elro Aldator, who has not noticed the mustache drawn onto his face at this point. And he offers them a job in finding out what's been going on and basically turning these people who are getting this sick into solid icicles. The group learned the following: that 2 months ago, Ergon Winth had gone exploring in Isocross and he had returned home. He had been back for only a few days when he came down with this strange affliction, which made him move more slowly and caused blue veins to appear all over his body. The village priests used just about every spell that they could to attempt to heal Ergon, and the village healers also tried, but nothing they could do would stop this bizarre malady. Ergon battled the affliction for weeks until his ever-slowing body eventually turned to ice. And yesterday, everybody had kind of thought Ergon's fate was an isolated incident. But then Elro had noticed that Tolgi Latan, a trapper, was showing signs of the same illness. With that, our group set forth, agreeing to help Elro and figure out what is going on in the strange Palebank village. That was the end of our first session right there, and from there we'll go into our second session, or chapter 2. After agreeing to help Elro, the group decided that they would first go to Ergon's cabin to investigate before heading back out of town to check on Tolgi. The group went into Ergon's cabin, and after convincing the Glass Blade, the village guard, that they were sent by Elro, along with a little bit of flirting from Milo, the group investigated the cabin, but were unable to learn too much. After looting Ergon's cabin, the group then headed out of town to go to Tolgi Latan's house. Milo recognized this as a name of someone from a rival family who had been selling stolen goods to the highest bidder back in the, kind of nefarious area of Shady Creek Run, his hometown. While trying to make friends with some wolves in the woods, they had bit off a little bit more they could chew with a little bit of a hard-fought battle between the group and the 3 wolves. Though eventually they made it to Tolgi's house, there was some disappointment in not procuring a pet. The snow-covered cabin looked a little bit peaceful and quiet from the outside. The windows were shuttered, and a stream of steady smoke was piping out of the chimney, indicating a roaring fire inside. At first, Tolgi was reluctant to let the adventurers in, but they were able to convince her that they were there to help, so she let them in. As they came in, the heat from the small cabin kind of hit them like a hammer blow. A table was set stacked with dishes, tools, and utensils that were kind of sitting in the center of the room, and the smell of a simmering soup kind of came from a hot pot hanging inside the roaring fireplace. Another fire burned in an iron brazier at the opposite end of the room, filling the cabin with a smoky haze. Shivering at the end of the bed near the brazier was a dwarf wrapped in blankets. Bulging blue veins streaked through her face, hands, and neck, and she gave the group the following information. The Utalat family, which was a rival gang to Milo's Mardoon family back in Shady Creek Run, had sent 2 sisters, Tolgi and her sister, to the village to try and keep an eye on treasures coming back from Isocross, a island recently discovered that has a lot of mysterious artifacts coming back from there. They had the intent of stealing them, and when such artifacts came through the small settlement, they usually either bought or stole the goods and sold them back to the Udalat family back in Shady Creek Run. When Ergon Winth returned to Pelbank Village with treasures from Isocross, Tolgi decided that she was going to steal some of his items. He waited until Ergon had sold her gifts or his items to Pelk's Curiosities, and then stole some of them. She gave most of her relics to her sister, but kept one for herself, an ornate dagger. Grudgingly, she gave this weapon to Orion, and Holiel had all of the other items at a site north of the village known as Croaker Cave. Tolgi was the only one who ultimately searched Ergon's cabin, convinced that the dead dwarf must have had magic or other secrets stored away there. After leaving Tolgi's cabin, the group headed further into the bitter cold wilderness toward Croaker Cave when they were accosted by a group of Udalot bandits that they were able to defeat. With Nyx going down down hard in the fight and the team needing a little bit of recovery, they determined to camp out in the woods overnight near the cave to heal up through the evening. At the start of our third session, Chapter 3, through the night, another traveler was coming up the road. An orcish paladin, a former fighter of the gladiator pit, on a mission to find an object called a vestige of divergence after seeing a vision granted to him from his god Cord. While our heroes ate breakfast, Hizzle came up the road. Milo and Nyx immediately drew their weapons and were suspicious, but Laro and Orion convinced the group that they might need all the help that they could get before heading into the cave. With their new friend Hizzle at the head of the group with Sikax, they made their way into the cave entrance. Looking in, they could hear the croaks of giant ice frogs and the water dripping from stalactites in a pool of frigid water that stretched across the length of the first cavern. With some quick thinking and a discussion, Milo gave his grappling hook to Hizzle, who secured their way across by hooking a log that they could cross over on. As they tried to cross, though, they were attacked by two giant ice frogs who did some damage to Sikax, but latched on to the steel mail of Hizzle ineffectively. After crossing the water, they encountered a swarm of bats. Excited about defeating a foe, Milo let out a joyful, drunken shout that echoed through the cavern. This then sparked a group of bandits up ahead to come out and attack the group on two different fronts. But slowly and effectively, our troop ended up defeating the bandits and the giant frogs accompanying them. With a brief exploration of the next cavern, Milo saw some empty alcohol bottles across the bedrolls and ran for them, missing a trap and falling down onto some spikes. With his friends pulling him out and their new friend Hizzle healing the wounded, they pressed on into the next cave, one with an even bigger giant toad called Old Croaker. Old Croaker got one really good shot in, knocking Nyx out instantly with a vicious bite, but the rest of the group quickly made short work of the toad, however, and the group made their way across his new pool. With fast thinking from Orion, they had utilized the log that they had used to cross the first pool back at the entrance. On the other side of this pool, they were then confronted by Holiel Latan, the sister of Tolgi, and it seemed that Holiel did not want to fight, and told her companion to lay down his sword. Holiel looked to be affected by the same sickness that had affected her sister and had killed Ergon. She was able to give the players a bit more of an idea of what this disease is, calling it frigid woe. Nyx, the cleric, had heard a bit about this disease and gave the group some more information. That the disease is transmitted by breathing in some blue spores that Aeor's mages had created a long time ago. It takes a few days for the symptoms to manifest in an infected creature, but these symptoms include fatigue, chills, and visible blue veins that appear under or on the creature's body. The players asked what the cure was worth to Holiel, and she agreed to pay them 100 gold pieces for every antidote that they were able to get to her. Laro then offered his ship as a means of transportation over to Isocross, but during negotiation on the price, Milo mentioned that the group had just murdered all of Holiel and Ragrin's friends, leaving us at the verge of a battle for our next session. And if you guys want to find out what happens in that session, check out Chapter 4 on YouTube and shortly on Spotify.